Well, that is the great thing about being a conservative, and the actual thing that I'm jealous of them about is the central tenet of conservatism is everything's for sale, including our principles,
That's so
right?
that's so
So,
that's so
I mean,
incorrect, Christian.
when when you live in that world, then it's just great. Anything's possible.
There is nothing wrong with disagreeing with people, and I completely
Mm-mm.
respect that. Where I lose respect for people is when they disagree with people because they have some straw man version of their actual argument. And they're disagreeing with the straw man because the straw man is really easy to disagree with because it's so
Mm.
ridiculous. It's not even their argument. All right.
Unprecedented. Hey now, it's your boy PSA Sitch here with a very early. Oh my God, we're so, usually me and Adam are so late. Every
Yes.
show, we're so late. We decided we're going to make up for it by being 2 hours early.
Can we count this towards every show now?
Yes.
That we have like 2 hours in the bank early so we can start 10. How many shows is that? Quite a few.
Somebody forgot the math. I think we're caught up. But anyway, today. Oh, and I forgot. Today we're here with our favorite MMT simp, Adam Friended.
Yes. MMT scholar. You're supposed to say.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misspoke. Today we're joined by Christian Reilly. How you doing today, Christian?
I'm
Yes.
good, thanks, Sitch.
So Christian does a podcast, and I was telling Christian before the stream began that the MMT podcast is one of the few podcasts that I've watched every single episode, some episodes more than once. So I'm a huge fan of the MMT podcast. I know Sitch has listened to a couple episodes. I think the one that we were talking about, the Sam Levy episode, I sent to you, Sitch, and I think you said that you listened to that and liked it as well. So
that was a great one. Yeah.
About buffer stocks and whatnot. So I'm on the internet, Christian, and people know me as a dumb stoner from California. So when I start talking about economics, it kind of freaks people out a little bit that I seem to know what I'm talking about. So I reached out to Christian. I guess I was telling him I have a little bit of a parasocial relationship here. I'm like meeting my hero. So Christian, his podcast is great. I often want to recommend it to people, but we have a very eclectic audience, Christian, as I was telling you before we began. So one of the things that I want to talk about is like the left right super polarized divide, and how we can build how do we bring conservatives into the MMT space? Is that even possible?
I think it is, and I think you did a really good thing. You asked me, how much of your show I've seen. You did have Warren on, didn't you?
I did. I did
Warren,
talk
and
with Warren.
I think that's the best thing you can do, really, because he comes from the world of finance. He's former fund manager, so he knows what he's talking about, and I think he knows how. They'll have had him on like Fox News and stuff like that, and when say he tells a story about when they were after an economist or a commentator who was for expanding the deficit, and I'm pretty sure it was Fox News, and he said, okay, yes, my plans are a full payroll tax holiday, and basically cutting taxes, stuff the Tea Party would be very aligned with, and obviously that would expand the deficit. And apparently the interviewer said, oh, so you're one of these big spending liberals then? and the person that he was on with said, no, he said tax cut. Just to remember. So it's almost like they've got their response ready to go, and they'd kind of basically booked the wrong person. They wanted somebody who say, yeah, we should expand the deficit by funding social services or whatever, public services. And he was like, no, there are other ways to expand the deficit, and basically it depends on your politics. You can increase spending or cut taxes or both. So I think Warren's the best bridge on that right left divide thing, because he does say, let's keep politics out of it. You know, we know the evidence that the deficit is too small is that there's unemployment, you know, and so we can expand it. We can afford, there's unused capacity. We can afford to expand the deficit. And if you are to the right of center, you might want the private sector to figure out what to do with that extra demand. So you cut taxes. And if you're to the left of center, you might have some plans about high-speed rail, solar panels, whatever. Then you know, you could expand the deficit that way. So to me, that's the way MMT crosses the left-right divide.
So do you want to, can you give us a brief summary of MMT? I messaged you about coming up with like the three most important aspects of MMT. So
that was ages ago.
I know. I didn't really. I but
well, God, what did we say? I'm going to find the message. Actually.
A lot of our show is just kind of brainstorming things, you know, in real time. So it's fine. You like the intros in your podcast are really great and they're really funny. I think. Do you do stand up comedy on the side or something like that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. I go and do stand up, but I do it with music as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of musical stand up. Yeah.
Sweet.
So
yeah.
It has the texture of stand up.
The jokes are super funny. I've contemplated pulling some of them out and putting video to them just because they would make great standalone explainers, and they are super funny. You always put a bunch of jokes in. Sometimes you put jokes in that are a little bit at conservatives' expense, which would be tough for our audience, obviously. Sure. Yeah. But that's the question that we often have is like building an audience that's exclusively left or right, I think is very easy, and a lot of people do it. Building an audience that's, you know, kind of centrist based is the hardest challenge, but obviously, you know, that's kind of the path that we have taken.
Yeah, stupid path that we've taken.
No, I think there's room for that, isn't there? And I mean, you guys have got tons of subscribers and everything, haven't you? So it's obviously
we're holding our own.
You're obviously, you know, you're obviously in demand. So you're obviously filling a demand there. So that's good. I think the reason people end up doing, I just speaking personally, I think for me, you know how I was just saying, Warren talks about, look, keep your he doesn't say to people, keep your politics out of it. He's saying you can keep the politics out of it. You know, we know that we need to expand the deficit, and then there's a way to do that that will suit a more conservative person, and there's a way to do that will suit a more, I guess the word progressive is thrown around too much, but you know.
Well, would you call yourself a progressive? How do you classify yourself? I don't want to.
It's different. I know it's different over here.
You don't want to say liberal over there.
yeah, absolutely.
Is that bad? Really?
It's different in the UK, I think. Liberal. Yeah, we kind of. You know how? Okay, let's have a look at the US. Okay, so as an outsider who's intensely interested in what's going on in your wonderful country, it seems to me that you up until now, you know, that you have this thing where you with presidents you have some periods where, and I'm talking about the electorate in the aggregate, so I'm not describing any particular person here.
I want you to go hard on someone. I want you to insult the hell out of some group of people right now.
Christian, feel free to speak your mind. We'll rein you in if you say anything.
Let's say like when
don't hold back.
Let's say like when Obama wins, okay,
right.
Then that says to me that, okay, the electorate as a whole, you know, I mean, all right, let's forget about the electoral college and everything and how that skews it and everything, but the electorate as a whole wanted to be, you know, whether, I mean, you know, Obama didn't really publish any policies or anything before he got elected. He was great on rhetoric and, you know, a great politician for that reason. But people, it seems to me, the country as a whole chose more to associate with that texture of a a politician,
Mhm.
of somebody who's like, I'm thinking first and shooting second,
Right.
and to me, it was a reaction against the George W. Bush years, which was like, look, we're just sick of being associated with this, clown, right? And it seems to me you have a few years of that, and then obviously Obama being really neoliberal and not really delivering on the healthcare front. I think the Affordable Care Act, if when people look at it soberly, it's like really a gift to the insurance industry. It left a lot of people behind, and so, just as a for instance, it was very easy to then level the charge at Obama, that it's like, well, he's like a lot of the nominally progressive politicians and politics that we've had in recent years, big on rhetoric, not really delivering at the actual real change.
Right.
And so people reacted really, that basically gave the right-wing demagogues the space to go, see, it's corrupt. Washington's corrupt, that they never deliver. I'm going to shake things up. Trump comes along, me, the landed gentry. I'm for you, the outsider. I'm going to shake things up. The guy that ran a TV show where it wasn't enough that the losers lost, they had to sort of, what was it,
Had to be fired.
No, they had to be on an island looking at the winners, right? While the winners had a party. So do you know what I mean? It wasn't like you could just get voted. So there's obviously something there as a psychic pool of like a wish fulfillment that needs to be fulfilled. And anyway, so I reckon that gives the space for I'm going to call it Trumpism to come along, but I'm sure it's not entirely new, is it? We can trace the roots of that kind of demagoguery to earlier periods. But so you swing between this sort of like go for your guns cowboy, and then we're over that. We want the liberal guy, we want the sort of coastal elite type person, and then it just the pendulum swings. I don't even know if it's going to swing back again now, because I mean Biden's really messing it up. I mean, he's early on there were a few surprises. He did a few things that you're like, oh, okay, that was more progressive than I thought he was going to be. But I don't think he's doing enough, and they're going to get hammered in the midterms, and they're going to blame that on anybody that said defund.
Well, they're blaming
rather than blaming it on their own actual shitty performance.
They're blaming a lot of Biden's policies on MMT. I constantly see that going on.
Yeah.
When Stephanie Kelton did that write-up in the New York Times where she was talking about how if you want to avoid inflation, you really have to be smart about targeting your tax cuts in places that are not pinch points for inflation. But I haven't seen Biden do any of that stuff. Like Biden is talking about forgiving college debt, which would obviously, the money supply expands through spending or lending and contracts through paying back loans. So if the students aren't paying back those loans, they're going to have money that's adding to the inflation. And right now we have a massive inflation problem.
Yeah. Which again is, if you to look at everything that's happened in the last 2 years, with all the supply chain disruptions, and then now the war, Russia invading Ukraine, and sanctions and things like that, and then to look at the inflation and go, oh, it's because there's too many dollars in existence, is a little bit.
Do you think? Because the Ukraine situation is a little is interesting because they're gonna send. Like they're sending this huge aid package over there, but isn't Ukraine also causing supply chain disruptions? That's like that's what I'm saying. The conflict itself, right? Yes,
like Russia and Ukraine, I think, are the breadbasket of the world in terms of grain, aren't they?
Right. Sort of yes. Wheat exactly.
So you've got that, and then you've got the energy, the Russian energy, and I don't know which exports of Russia are subject to sanctions. I did hear that that they were allowing some energy exporting because Europe couldn't live without it. But it changes quite rapidly. I don't know what's happened in the last few days. I think there was talk of like, okay, now nobody's allowed to have Russian energy. Nobody's allowed to buy it.
Well, if you want to talk a little bit more about the Trump stuff, you had one podcast, and I sense that you are very much against Donald Trump. Like, I think in the podcast you in the beginning called him a racist and said you thought Donald Trump was like the biggest racist. I can't remember what it was. But you did, okay. Yeah, in the intro, and it was. Okay. I mean, I'm paying attention to this because I mean we have a lot of people who listen to the show that voted for Trump and they don't perceive Trump as a racist, and I think Trump is kind of this Rorschach inkblot test where if you want to see him as a racist you can, if you don't want to see him as a racist you don't have to. So without addressing the claim of whether he is racist, I don't want to get in a debate over whether he is a racist or is not a racist. My concern was there's this podcast. You're telling information about MMT that I find very, very valuable that I would love to share. And I have trouble sharing it because all of a sudden half of our audience is going to go, Adam, why are you sitting to this thing? This guy, obviously, they're going to say TDS. I'm sure you've heard the term Trump derangement syndrome. They're going to accuse you of that. Yeah. It's going to be this big, like.
Well, yeah. Yes. So anyway, I was going to talk about this before, but I got sidetracked.
That's okay.
You guys are such wonderful conversation. I don't shy away from the like my personal politics because I think I'm trying to demonstrate that, okay, whether it came from me who's being overtly on the left, I mean, right. I don't, every episode isn't like you must read Karl Marx or anything like that. We don't talk much about, Marxian economics much, but I'm trying to show that, okay, whether I said it or Donald Trump said it, it's true. Donald Trump has famously said, "How can we run out of money? We print the money." So that's a way to go. Okay, look, it's not a left-right thing. So I mean, I wouldn't then go, oh, well, Donald Trump's lying because he's a liar. I'd be like, yeah, people who lie about other things tell the truth about something.
Let's back it up a second because I think you refreshed my memory on something, Christian. I think in the context of what you were doing there was you have an audience that is predominantly left-wing that is going to lose their fucking shit as soon as you start saying Donald Trump understands MMT and he said. We just print the money. We can print as much as we want because that is a point in MMT's favor. So you want to mention that, but you can't mention that without saying, "Oh, by the way, Donald Trump is a giant racist." Otherwise, is that what's going on? I mean,
I'm thinking like if you've got like a whole bunch of like sort of scholars and people who are kind of scholars who are really good communicators,
right?
Saying a thing, and then. A right-wing demagogue saying the same thing. It's like, well, who shall I go to as a source out of all of those? I feel that there's something a bit kind of like, it just, I guess it's not really because people will take it as I'm going, look, Donald Trump said this thing. So I like Donald Trump. I don't think they would take it like that. I think they would kind of go, yeah, Donald Trump says, says all kinds of things. He's very much just takes a scattergun approach to rhetoric and facts. And, basically if he says one thing and then the opposite and then the original thing and then the opposite there enough times, there'll be enough clips of him circulating on social media that he go, see, I said that thing.
Yeah.
Whereas he 2 minutes later he said the opposite. So
neither one of us are Trump supporters. I know we have a bunch of Trump supporters in our audience, and one of the goals of the show is really just we're living in a situation where people can't even have reasonable conversations without misinterpreting what the other one is saying.
I agree.
So we're just trying to bridge that divide, obviously. So I don't know if you've read any Jonathan Haidt or know about social intuitionism. It's this idea that, people's gut reactions, their moral intuitions are really driving a lot of the dialogue going on, and the rationalizations come in after the fact for, what they want to believe. So we subscribe to that philosophy very much. So go ahead, Christian.
So the reason, sorry to interrupt, and feel free to go. The reason that I don't shy away from my politics is not. It's not because they're dear to me or anything like that. Well, they are. I mean, obviously, I believe I believe that I'm correct.
Right.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't. I mean, my door is always open to be persuaded otherwise and stuff, and that's how you uncover things like MMT and stuff, because you're looking around for ideas, I guess. But it's because I've got this idea from another person that you're possibly a Trump supporter would not like, from Noam Chomsky, which is that bias is not the problem. Undisclosed bias is the problem.
Right.
Right. So now my bias, whoever you are that happens to be listening to this, you can now adjust for it. I'm not going to pretend to be even-handed. I think I'm a reasonable person, but I'm not going to pretend. I can't do this equivalent of like these extreme leftists who want free healthcare are exactly the same as these extreme right wingers who just want to kill black people. I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying all extreme right wingers want to do that, but it keeps happening, doesn't it?
See. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I've heard that framing before. I mean, I don't like the framing of, obviously there are extreme, white nationalists. We just had the shooting recently about that. But I mean, there are extreme leftists who I wouldn't categorize them as wanting free healthcare. I'd categorize them as wanting to basically overturn capitalism and replace it with some kind of Marxism or socialism. And I think that could have equally bad outcomes as trying to reestablish some kind of white ethno state in America, which will never happen.
Oh, so you've got left wingers trying to establish a white ethno state?
No. You got
right wingers.
Yeah, and I'm saying you have left wingers that.
Sorry, I misheard.
You got left wingers that want to overthrow capitalism and replace it with Marxism or some kind of socialism.
Yeah, this is one of the things I like about MMT, because MMT
what would that look like?
MMT is people.
I know that's a good question. It could look like
thing.
It could look like China.
We know what the white
Soviet
ethno state would look like, right?
Right. But
okay,
I think, it's weird to me that like right now, a lot of the biggest streamers on the left right now are not liberals. They're not even progressives. They're socialist.
Right. Okay.
And in America, anyway, it seems like a lot of even moderate Democrats, even Joe Biden, they sort of have to couch their rhetoric to appease a lot of, the woke culture war stuff, which is in my mind all dominated by sort of a far leftist fringe ideology stuff.
Biden's been doing nothing but like trying to distance himself from, Black Lives Matter and defund the police and stuff like that.
Has he? I'm not sure.
Okay, all right. Maybe we're looking at different sources.
Biden did try to distance himself from defund the police.
He did from defund. They all did from defund the police because that was so obviously bad. Right?
They're basically signaling, look, we're not. That we're not the extreme left of the party,
Yeah,
but they were giving a soft defense of CRT. They were giving a soft defense of a lot of the gender ideology stuff.
None of that stuff has ever been mentioned on the MMT podcast, just to let you know. Sitch.
I assume not. I assume it's mostly talk about
Christian made one comment about Trump, and I think that's the only comment he's ever made about Trump. So obviously,
I can't remember what it was anyway, but
to me, when we're talking about like political polarization, it's not a question of, I don't think anyone should hide their biases. We're all biased.
Yeah.
I think it's more that we should try to understand what the other side is saying politically and not strawman them. and just say like, oh, like give like this is your argument. I understand where you're coming from. I disagree with what you're saying, but I understand where you're coming from. And I don't like the framing of kind of the far left is not a threat and the far right is a threat, because I view them both as threats. I mean, we're enlightened centrist here. I view both ideological extremes as a potential threat to my country anyway.
Yeah, neither one of us are Trump supporters. I didn't vote for Trump. We're basically disaffected liberals. So, I know what's wrong with the term liberal in London. I'm curious.
I didn't. I you said that. I didn't say that.
Well, I thought
Okay.
liberal meant like conservative in over there.
Yeah. Well. There's. I mean, I don't really know. There's a few different things going on here, which is one is okay. So we had, you know, how I was talking about the way I perceive it, which is, you know, and I'm not living over there, and I don't, you know, I mean, I'm not on the ground over there, but the way I perceive it is that, you know, that you know, politically, in terms of choice of president, you know, you have a period where you choose to associate yourself with the, you know, what did George H.W. Bush say? You know, I don't care what the facts are. Do you know, I will never apologize for America, and, you know,
Based.
you know, do you know what I mean? That kind of. But I mean, I just
Right.
love that. I just like, I don't care what the facts are.
Mhm.
You know?
We're
He said that.
delicate.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
say
yeah,
that.
absolutely, yeah. So you know, you kind of, it seems the nation gets sick of that. That's, as an outsider looking in, seems like the nation gets sick of that kind of mentality, then goes to somebody who's kind of speaking in more sort of measured, you know, charismatic though. You know, Bill Clinton was charismatic. You know, said, I mean, remember when, you know, Hillary herself said something like, you know, I'm a center left, center right candidate. And, you know, it was like, to her, there's no difference between those, you know, it's, you know, and it's like, okay, it seems to me that that's not enough to move people, you know, you know, as the election, you know, played out, you know, it's not enough to move people. But, you know, Biden won last time, so, you know.
I think with Obama and Trump, I think it was sort of the same force animating people after the 2008, you know, after 8 years of Bush and the failure of the wars and Katrina, and then specifically the housing
financial
crash.
crisis. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, people were sort of desperate for, we need a change. We need to move off of whatever we're doing. I think people did want to move away from neoliberal economic policies, even if they couldn't, you know, verbalize that or understand that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so they get Obama in office. And then, as you said or alluded to, you know, Obama didn't really follow through. He didn't really deliver the change in a way that people at least felt or perceived like he delivered change. So I think a lot of people turned to Trump, who was basically like, I'm just going to kick the table over because everything sucks.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
I think people were like, maybe this was too far.
Yeah,
Let's
maybe
go with Joe Biden. Let's go with Sleepy Joe here. Let's take it back a notch.
Yeah. Dial it back. Yeah. So anyway, liberal over here. Okay. So we had this situation where we've had the Conservatives for such a long time, and the Conservatives were swept in on the back of all the disgruntlement over the way the great financial crisis manifested itself over here in the UK, which was, you know, austerity policies. And so we had the Labour Party in, and the Labour Party is at that point a centrist party. So talking, you know, lots of good liberal rhetoric, but like absolutely imperialist as fuck overseas. You know, just, you know, would back George Bush's invasions and stuff to the hilt and everything like that. So the left, and it's not an insignificant fringe, but the left of the Labour Party and the left of the Labour Party voters were very sick of Blair by the time he went, and then by the time the general election came along in 2010, was 2010? I can't remember now. We were really suffering from the financial crisis and the Blair administration, or the Labour government had swallowed the line about the thing we need to do now that everybody's really suffering is the deficit's too big, our national debt's too big. We need to cut that, and the way to cut that is to cut back on public services. And so we'd been suffering all that, and then the election comes along in 2010, and the Conservatives don't win a majority, and so the balance of power is that, so there's going to be a coalition government, and the balance of power was with the Liberal Democrats. That's the third party here, the Liberal Democrats, the Lib Dems, and so many people assumed, I would say it was probably a common assumption amongst people across the political spectrum, that in a pinch, the Liberal Democrats will go with Labour.
And Labour is center right or center left or
center left?
Okay, center
left.
Right.
So
they're basically the kingmakers,
and they were kind of kind of Obama-esque left, like very. Right. Kind of progressive rhetoric and some kind of
neoliberal policies.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it.
When you say neoliberal, what do you mean by neoliberal? Like libertarian, laissez-faire capitalism? I just want to get the terminology. So
let me just cap off this thing about the liberals. So at this point, the liberals held the balance of power, and they went with the Conservatives, and people were up in, and that's what started this latest era of
liberal stuff
over here. This latest sort of spell that the Conservatives have been in office, and that's like 20 odd years now, and also we've got this thing, and I know you have it in the States, where you talk about the way, gerrymandering and stuff like that, the way districting is done, and the way the electoral college system works and everything. I know that, I'm sure, your average American who's bothered about these kind of things thinks you need electoral reform, right?
Yes, definitely.
Just a different way of counting the votes, maybe where you get a ranked choice or something like that, just something else that would mean that your vote would still count even if your preferred candidate didn't win, or things like that, just to, but so there's a similar strand of political aspiration in this country. People want electoral reform, and because we have a thing called first past the post system, and it's too tedious to go into, but it's similar to the gripes that you guys have. It is
some sort of ranked choice, right? Or no?
No.
First past the post is the opposite of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to bring in this thing called proportional representation, which some people would see as fairer,
right?
And so it's as I understand it in the broad strokes, although we've never had it implemented, it's basically the proportion of the votes gets that number of seats in Parliament. So if you percentage-wise, you just divide it up percentage-wise, and so basically there's no chance of anybody getting electoral reform, really, because what happens is the party in power won on the current rules, right? So they're there. You're never going to get, have you ever been playing a game like Monopoly or something where you just go halfway through to the person who's winning, hey, would you mind changing the rules in a way that makes you lose and me win? And then, and that person go, yeah, what a great idea, let's do that, right? And so to me, on a point of logic, that's what's going to happen every time, except there was this window between what year was it, 2010 and 2015, where the Conservatives were in coalition with the Liberals, right? The Liberals are supposed to sort of like, their whole, when people were mad at them for, siding with the Conservatives, they were going, yeah, but we can do great things. We can temper their right-winginess with our, wonderful centristness, and
Oh no.
and basically, so there was this Goldilocks situation where the party in power had to compromise a little bit, and so the compromise was, okay, we will put a referendum to the country about whether we want proportional representation, electoral reform or not. And they went to the country and we voted against it. So that was our one window to reform the voting system. I can't see something like, I mean, it could come up again, if there's another sort of hung parliament situation, but who knows, the country could just vote in the same way again. So anyway,
do you know anything about
long-winded? Sorry.
Do you know anything about selectorate theory? Because some of this does play into selectorate theory, something we talk about on the show a lot.
I've never heard of it.
You should read the book, The Dictator's Handbook. It's like, it's as fascinating as the MMT stuff. If you're into politics, obviously you are, but it's about democracy versus autocracy and coalition building. The subtitle of the book is I believe, why bad behavior is good politics, which is, I mean, it's so true. But there are these windows of opportunity, like you said, if you're paying attention. So that
what's the name of the book again?
The Dictator's Handbook: Why Bad Behavior is Often Good Politics. It's Bruce Bueno de Mesquita and Alistair Smith. It's a very, very popular book. Selectorate theory. When you're reading a lot of what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and stuff like that, you can see that the policy wonks really buy into selectorate theory in a way that it's kind of going mainstream, in the same way that MMT is kind of going mainstream now. That idea is super powerful in understanding politics. Like right now, like we both agree from an MMT lens, Biden is doing the wrong things to fight inflation, but he's doing these things because, obviously he wants college kids to show up and vote for him in 4 years. So that's why he wants to forgive student debt. It has nothing to do really with what's good for the economy. It's what's good for his voter coalition. So
will he forgive? No, I don't like to use.
I don't think he can do it.
Will he cancel student debt?
I don't think it can happen. Yeah.
Do
you want to give
it? It's a good.
This is not even if it's good. This is not the time to do it.
Well, it's a good thing
no. I wasn't talking about
entice voters to come back.
Sure, I was just going to say it's a good reflection on the debt cancellation movement that it's on the agenda. That's all I was going to say about that.
So
there was a long period of time when college was free, as I understand it, over there, certainly over here, and then all of a sudden you had to borrow to do it to go to college.
I don't know if college was ever free here.
So here we have.
When I say, I mean, okay.
Yeah, it's not free, but let's move on to.
Tuition was free.
Here's a common response we get. I would like you to try and address here. Troll with a Purpose says MMT equals literally reducto ad absurdum. So obviously, I mean, I've made some headway. We do have some fans that understand MMT, and like we've gotten comments that are like, "Oh my God, it finally clicked for me. It makes a lot of sense." I think looking at the modern economy through an MMT lens is helpful. A lot of people can't separate the lens from the policy prescriptions. And I do blame some of that. Like I would love to be able to recommend Stephanie Kelton's book, but the second half of the book is just going to trigger the shit out of anyone who's slightly right wing, because it sounds crazy to them. So
I just think you can't.
Well, let's
think if you are, I mean, obviously you guys are centrists, right? Okay. So
yes,
that it's your job to worry about triggering the left and triggering the right. Okay.
Right.
I'm not a centrist.
No, and listen,
I don't have to worry about that. But
Christian,
I think if you do live in fear of triggering the right, you're going to live in fear forever, because they're not going away.
Christian, I want to make this crystal clear.
Unfortunately.
Christian, I want to make this crystal clear. I'm not here advocating for you to change anything about your podcast, okay? Or your
Adam
politics,
wants tips, basically,
or your politics.
Right, okay.
I don't. You be as you do. You be as left wing as you can be. I would love to have you back on again. I would love to have, you're obviously a very smart person in the YouTube space. There are not a lot of lefties that are honest actors that you can have these kind of conversations with.
Okay,
And it's
right.
very discouraging. Like it is.
Oh, that's a shame.
It
Yeah.
sounds like you are maybe, would you classify yourself as a socialist or a Marxist? I don't even know. It never comes up in the podcast.
Yeah, yeah. I would just say I'm on the left, really.
Okay.
And I think the terms like socialist and Marxist have come to mean all kinds of different things now, so they're not helpful. So I'm not ducking the question at all.
Right. Well,
so I would have to then sort of, I think, I really would like to be honest and an open book about my politics. And
you don't have to answer anything you don't want to answer.
No, absolutely. No, I'm trying to. What I'm saying is, I think, and also socialist has a different sort of emotional impact over here in Britain than it does in the States. I think, you really mean USSR when you say socialist.
No, here
I've seen that happen.
I think you're incorrect, because socialist in America, people love. Socialist in America is like a good thing. Yeah. Which is a recent development. But this is another thing about the MMT, because a lot of people on the left are accused of being anti-capitalist, and I perceive MMT as pro-capitalist. I don't know how you can make how it can be anti-capitalist.
Well, it is a branch of post-Keynesian thought, right? That's what MMT is, right? And Keynes, is, some Marxists will say, oh, Keynes was trying to save capitalism and we want capitalism to go down in flames.
Yeah.
So we're not interested in your thing, and actually, there are a fair few Marxists, prominent Marxists, who are kind of against MMT, or, but really what we're saying, what we're saying to all those kinds of people, whether they're on the right or the left, is like, yeah, but I mean, if you listen to that buffer stocks episode that we've been talking about, what we're saying is it's falsifiable whether we're telling the truth or not when we say governments spend by crediting bank accounts. They do that with keystrokes. They don't hammer gold coins into the internet and now there's money in your bank account. It's keystrokes. And, and we also know, I'm sure, again, across the political spectrum, we know that you in the United States, we in the United Kingdom, and many nations around the world, we're not on the gold standard. When you go and look to a bureau de change or something, there's a whole bunch of exchange rates. This is what the dollar is worth against the pound, and this is what the pound is worth against the euro. We can see that that it's a floating exchange rate currency, right? So it's got nothing to do with how much gold it's worth or anything like that. So we know we're not on the gold standard. Okay, if you accept that fact, then you have to accept the fact that this is how governments spend. They're not constrained by how much of a precious metal exists in a vault somewhere.
What are they constrained by?
Well, politics. They're constrained by, if you vote, if the legislation with the spending passes Congress over there and Parliament over here, that spending is going to happen.
But
whether it causes inflation or not,
correct. But I mean, I think
that spending is going to happen.
Well, I understand that, but I think that you have to admit that the real constraint is inflation, because right now Biden is in a situation, and this is a perfect time to talk about this, because Biden's inflation problem, I think, is going to cost him re-election. If he runs again, I think it's going to cost the Democrats a lot of support in the midterm election. So inflation is a real constraint. One of the things that I often talk about is right now, and a lot of people on the right, on the left, they are afraid of talking about stuff in the MMT framework because of deficits. They want deficits to curb politicians' spending. But I don't know why, since the deficit really doesn't matter, why we're not substituting the deficit monster is what we want to constrain politicians' spending.
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
can't we
I mean,
substitute?
inflation.
No, why can't we substitute the deficit monster for the inflation,
For the inflation monster.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, I just wanted to jump in there and say, I try not to use the word. I don't know. You were saying it casually. I try not to use the phrase "deficits don't matter."
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
Because I think it's too it contains no information and it doesn't tell you anything about MMT, right? The way Stephanie Kelton says it, which and obviously you probably
She says it a lot.
you can't get much more authoritative than her. Oh, I thought the way she said it, the way maybe I'm focusing on different parts of her output, but the way she says it is, no, deficits do matter. They just don't matter in the way we used to think they mattered.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We used to think that the deficit. You've got a beautiful cat. That is
I
a cat,
forget
right?
that you can see me. Yeah.
yeah. No, I've got basically my guy's usually on the top bunk.
Can you give a lot of people are in the dark? We need to do a summary of MMT.
Okay,
so we've got like Christian, you have the floor. You do the most amazing summaries of MMT.
Yeah, but I'm not.
You're like, those are written out ahead
prepared.
of time.
Okay, all right. So let's. So, yeah, okay. I'm going to try and pick things that people hopefully won't find controversial, which is the thing that I just said about the floating exchange rate.
You've already said you think Trump's a racist, so we can't go back on the controversial thing. The horse has left the barn.
That's me, yeah. But that's still a true That's still a true statement, though. I think Trump is racist.
Right.
That's a true statement.
We'll argue that one another time.
Which is that's different to Trump is racist.
Right.
I think Trump is racist.
Right.
That's a true statement.
Okay, MMT, non-controversial MMT stuff.
Yeah. So the stuff I said about it's a floating exchange rate currency.
Right.
Like nobody will argue with that, I think.
Right.
That it's not constrained by gold or anything like that. It's not a gold standard. It's okay.
We can print as much money as we want. But that's the straw man of MMT. We can't print as much money as we want.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay,
Christian, you're killing me here.
Well, the difference between you can and you want to.
The way I would say it again, I would try not to say print casually because hardly any of the money we use is printed.
Program.
I was going to create, or is a better word, and it brings up all these images of printing presses. It's on the news when they're talking about social spending. There's always a picture of the printing presses, and like when it's war spending, there's a picture of a missile shooting up.
Christian,
it's the same process.
Have you read "Don't Think of an Elephant" by George Lakoff? Yeah. So I sense that I've read every book George Lakoff has ever written. I sense that you're like, the psychology of this has to be right.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, no. I mean, I'm just seeing as I mean, are we limited for time? Are we going?
We have another hour. Yeah, we have plenty of time.
Okay, great. Okay, all right. So, and also I think the problem with MMT, or the challenge with MMT, is it isn't a bumper sticker. So whatever sort of aphorism you want to boil it down to, it's not quite that. What I've have you ever looked at the work of Seth Godin?
No.
Look him up. He's a marketer. He's very good. He has a great podcast. It's called Akimbo. And he's a fantastic communicator.
Right.
I think you'll dip into his work and you'll thank me for it. But he sort of said, I'm paraphrasing it. Hopefully I'm not distorting what he said, but he said, look, I don't do elevator pitches. Nobody bought anything on an elevator. Right?
No, that's not true. I'm in Los Angeles, okay? The elevator, most movies are sold in elevators. He's completely wrong about this.
I've got Ryan Reynolds and Renée Zellweger, and it's
I know exactly
and Marvel.
Exactly.
What can we do? Yeah. So he's more about
and Schindler's List meets a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So anyway, it doesn't boil down to a bumper sticker. I don't think.
We
But
need to
just while
boil
I
it down to a
just
bumper sticker, though. We do.
I don't think so, because when you say something like, uh, if you say something that's kind of declarative, like deficits don't matter, and then walk away, people will be like, well, that sounds kind of not correct. They must
True.
matter,
Yeah.
right? But if you say deficits do matter, just in a different way to what you might think they matter, that opens the door. I mean, are you inquisitive
Mhm.
about that? Because if you are, I could tell you some more about it. If you're not, I won't waste your time. I don't want to, I don't want to stick my foot in the door where, where I'm not welcome. I'd rather sort of build a kind of water cooler atmosphere where we're just chatting, and if you're curious about this stuff, here's the route I went through to get to the understanding that I've got. So I would say, yeah, if we understand that they are floating exchange rate currencies, then the governments do only spend one way. They spend by passing legislation, and then the spending that's in that legislation gets keyed into a spreadsheet, and that's money. Now eventually, there's the central banks part of it, and then there's the commercial banks part of it. But that's essentially what's happening when the government spends. And so therefore the idea of deficits is that every year the government spends some money, and it doesn't get it from anywhere. It keystrokes it into existence, and every year it taxes some money. If you just look at the consolidated federal government, it taxes some money, and there's a difference between those two figures, what it spends and what it taxes. And if it taxes less than it spends, they call it a deficit, but really that's money that's out there in the private sector that was spent into existence, that hasn't been cancelled out of existence by taxation. So now it's in the economy, it's in the private sector. It's people's wages, it's consumption spending, it can be investment spending. That's where the spending power of the private sector originates. Okay. And I think the problem is that we experience this money story. We come in halfway through, it's already up and running, it's already circulating. So it looks like we pay taxes, it's gone to the government, they're piling it up, now they're spending it. But really, when you think about it, if you've got a dollar in your wallet and you pull it out, where did it come from? If it's not counterfeit, it came from the government.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people like to argue about, well, it came from the Federal Reserve, it's not part of the government, but at the end of the day, they take their marching orders from Congress.
Yeah, we've had those arguments many times on the show.
I'm saying, like, you can keep having those arguments, perhaps with the same people, and eventually you come around to the idea that they don't want to be told different.
Right.
they want the Federal Reserve to be some conspiracy private sector entity that's a conspiracy, owned by evil bankers, and the government are completely powerless to do anything about it.
Well,
if they want that, going back to the kind of George Lakoff stuff, what can you do about it? You're just blowing against the wind. Why not move on to somebody who's kind of actually curious about what's going on? That would be
because
my
we like to
tactic.
argue on the internet. So
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you know what? That might be it, because I'm really not cut out for that. I try and just sort of like look for people who are already interested in it.
I mean, you're holding your own, Christian. What are you talking about? You're doing great.
Well, so someone had a comment that actually I think relates to this, which is why there's a lot of resistance to MMT, which is Coyote Doge says the typical resistance to MMT is the blatant polarization of the economy, or politicization of the economy. A centralized system can't keep up with a decentralized system. Politics can't keep up with the market. Which I don't necessarily agree with that conception, but
Also he's a crypto guy, so I
Right.
think he's a little biased in favor of crypto being some sort of decentralized system.
Fair enough.
I don't think
But we
I
don't need to argue about that. Like that commenter is saying that that is the way it is, though, right? Like,
Well, I don't know
you
that a
got
decentralized system is more efficient
yeah, I
than
know, but
a centralized monetary system.
but the description I just gave,
Hmm.
the reason that the crypto person doesn't like it is because I just gave the correct description of how governments spend.
Right.
So I'm not saying whether it's like good or bad or better than if we all just had cryptocurrency. I'm just saying that's the way it is.
Well, here's I think where people have the biggest reservations is because when governments spend, and this is why I brought up selector theory. Really, Biden is going to spend on the people that got him elected in the same way that Trump is going to spend on the people that got him elected. And people, get their panties in a giant twist as soon as a new administration comes in and starts spending money on, a coalition that's not them. They feel super chapped about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did Biden have any backing from corporate America or the security state?
Well, I don't know. Yeah.
Or did he just, I mean, he was basically put in there to make sure that Sanders didn't get anywhere near the presidency.
Right.
I would have thought that the people that, Joe is, you feel he's sucking up to right now are actually probably, Sanders voters who are just kind of, waiting for their chance to do it again.
Yeah. So MMT does.
Yeah.
This is another straw man of MMT that I hear constantly. Is just that MMT is infinite spending. That MMTers believe you can spend infinite or create infinite amount of money, which I think is a straw man mischaracterization of MMT, because Stephanie Kelton and Warren Mosler are both very clear about inflation being the constraint. That if you have an economy with a certain number of resources, labor is obviously a resource. Once you hit the upper end of those resource constraints, you're gonna get inflation. That's the situation that we're in now. We have a bit of a different situation now because we've got this war in Ukraine. We've also got COVID that took place. So not only do we have we hit the upper level of the resource constraint, the resource constraint is actually lowered down because we have these supply chain issues. So I think that's where we're getting inflation. And do you understand Warren Mosler on the interest rates and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah.
Okay.
It's hard to grasp. It took me a few goes because I understand inflation the way you just laid it out in the it's kind of an oversimplification. And so I'm not having a go at you because everybody says it all the time.
Well, what did I get wrong?
Inflation. No.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying
Tell Adam he's wrong.
No. I just
I thought that was your job, Sitch.
It is. But
All right.
Warren Mosler. I think the simplification.
You're using me as a prop.
yes.
I think the simplification helps a lot of people. And Warren Mosler says, imagine the economy as a giant shopping mall, right? And there's a certain number of things in that giant shopping mall. And imagine the money supply as all the money to buy the things, all the consumables in that shopping mall. And if you have a large pile of stuff, then and a small money supply, obviously those things are going to sync up in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean the shopping mall metaphor I would say is okay. When he's asked about taxation, because we took so there's this thing in MMT called chartalism.
Yes.
Which goes all the way back to Adam Smith and beyond, but Adam Smith is the one that sticks in my mind. There's a quote in Wealth of Nations, which is, a prince by something like levying a tax denominated in a certain piece of paper can impart value to that piece of paper. And
they create demand for the currency.
Yeah. Yeah, so and that's Adam Smith, but more recently you've got people like Abba Lerner, these are sort of like early 1900s people, Alfred Mitchell Innes, all people are writing about money, what is it, the credit theory of money and stuff like that. And basically going, yeah, this is how taxation works. It's not, it's that. And if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard me talk about Warren's guy with the gun thing ad infinitum, which is, Warren does his lecture where he goes, okay, there's like 50 people in the room, and he goes, okay, I'll go take out my business card. Would anybody stay after the lecture and clean the floor, and I'll pay 1 business card per hour? And people are like, no. And then he goes, okay, I'll pay 2 per hour. People are like, what's he talking about? Okay, 10. People go, okay, there's no takers, and I want to pay you guys to clean the floor in my business card. I'll add one more thing. There's a guy at the door with a machine gun, and he works for me, and you can't get out of the room unless you pay him 1 of my business cards. Now, who would like to stay and clean the floor, and I'll pay 1 per hour? And then he goes, the guy at the door is the tax man, right? Taxes are the thing that so he's basically using an exaggerated example to say, okay, this is what the law is. It's not that a guy with a machine gun is going to show up at your house if you don't pay your taxes, but there's going to be some bad consequences.
That is the right-wing conception of taxes, though. And
Yeah,
Warren totally explains it in that same way.
Exactly. Okay. So, but the point is, where does the money, the business card, come from? It doesn't originate over there in the private sector. It originates with this person issuing the currency, and they're only allowed to issue it because they've created a demand for it with taxes. Okay.
Right.
And that's how taxes work. So given that, if he spends 60 cards into existence, and then the tax is 10 on the whole room, that there's going to be 50 cards left. So in an even society, everyone's going to have 1 card left, and that's your private sector money. That's your deficit, right? That's how, that's, and so if you want there to be more spending power in the economy, you can lower the tax on the room, but you can't lower it to 0, because all of a sudden the ability to be able to spend the business cards goes away. But you can lower it to a very low level, and I know that Warren's very much for simplifying taxes, just basically putting the largest burden on, say, a property tax. And that would sort of discourage absentee ownership and stuff like that. And, oligarchs buying whole streets and, basically, living off those rents. And, and so he's very much like, let's, I think I've heard him say he's kind of, he's enough of a libertarian that he wants the taxes to function like this, to create the demand.
Create demand.
Yeah.
I wonder is there a way to get the guy?
It's not that even he wants that. It's like, that's how they function, whether we like it or not.
Is there a way to get the guy with the gun out of the equation? I mean, just as a mental
no, I know
exercise.
People hate it. But it's
because they also use, and Stephanie Kelton uses the example of a movie ticket. Like, money's like a movie ticket.
Yeah,
you buy the movie ticket, and the movie ticket is how you get into the movie. But as soon as you go to the movie, they tear up the ticket because it's served its purpose. Now the movie ticket is like an incentives type thing. Like, the movie, there's not a guy with a gun, but the movie ticket is worth money because you want to see the movie. It's like,
yeah, but the reason that metaphor doesn't work is because taxation is coercive.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, Warren is very clear about that.
Is there a way that you could make a tax system that's not coercive, though? That's my question.
I think that's up for debate. Yeah, absolutely. Is there a way to do that? Imagine, everything, all the public goods and services, whatever they are, or the public vote. Because even if you're a sort of, a very sort of small government libertarian type, you still want a court system. You still want property rights enforcing and stuff like that. There's no zero government scenario where that can happen. So you're going to need, though, you're going to want, even if you want the state to be quote unquote small, although how small a state that's, just cops and courts would be is, I'm not sure how small that would be.
We argue that a lot because I always say, the government needs to be
jails, cops and courts and jails.
Yeah. Well, I always say the government needs to be a certain size to achieve the goals that you want the government to achieve. So
right,
you really have to think, and this is one of the things that I like that Warren Mosler says. You have to decide first the size of government, and then work out the details from there. In the same way that you plan anything. So,
well, I like that idea. I would say, instead of saying big government, small government, let's talk about the size of it. Let's have that be a residual. Let's just have that be something that we measure it after the fact. Let's talk about what we want it to do, and then whether that ends up being a big government or a small government is, do you know what I mean? Let's be accurate about what we want government to do. Now, I know there'll be some people who say nothing. There's nothing the government can do that the private sector can't do better. But yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Then abolish all taxes.
Warren Mosler is very, Warren Mosler is very good on MMT because he, I think, perceives the MMT in a way that the government is supporting the private sector. And often when I talk about MMT, I try to talk about it in pro-business terms, which is the right is more empathetic to, and the left is often just reflexively anti-business. Also, one of the things that I like about MMT is the people who understand MMT, they're generally on the left, but they're not anti-capitalist. And I feel like so many people on the left are just virulently anti-capitalist. Like I said, we're basically disaffected liberals. Like, we've been on the left our entire lives, but we're both. I believe that capitalism, increases wealth. I read Why Nations Fail a long time ago, and it just sunk in that property rights is like the foundation of building a first world nation. And if you're talking about getting rid of property rights, you're really, you're trying to lift people out of poverty with both hands tied behind your back. So,
sure, yeah. I don't think anybody in I don't think MMT is saying that at all.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's one of the things that I like about
it's
it.
not something. So it's more about MMT is more about, to me, going, okay, look, you can have your ideas about what ways to build wealth and stuff like that. Let's debate them on the merits of, are they going to get us to where we want to go as a nation, as a community, rather than, well, we can't do that because we're going to run out of money. right Let's get that question off the table so we can talk about the real conditions that we want to engender in our domain.
There is an aspect of the way government works now that I think MMT illuminates, and it's inefficiency. And I think inefficiency is a good argument when you want to build a broad coalition on things, because the idea that Stephanie Kelton lays out in her book, she's very clear. She says, the way that we're constructing our economy now is we're keeping around 5% of our people unemployed deliberately in order to stave off price inflation. And she believes, as a point of logic, that rather than paying those people to be unemployed, we could be paying those people to work. And every day that 5% of our population does nothing and receives money, they create whether or not they add to inflation,
it's lost.
Yeah,
it's lost wealth.
She says a lot. That's a lunch, a free lunch, uneaten. Which that, as just a business person or a pro-capitalist person, all they talk about is government inefficiency. That's a glaring government inefficiency, a giant government inefficiency.
Yeah, I think Bill Mitchell, who's an Australian MMT, a co-founder of MMT, he in one of his earlier blogs, he's been blogging since the early 2000s. He had sort of like done I don't know whether he was quoting somebody else's research or whether he'd just done the calculations, but he was saying like the losses due to unemployment are bigger than the losses of all the world wars combined.
Yeah.
You know, in the period that he was measuring, it was like a 5-year period.
Right.
Do
And
you know what I mean?
in lost productivity.
Yeah.
See, and
because what happens in a war is you use a load of productivity, you know, and you make a load of stuff and then you blow it up.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's very
The other side's-
Keynesian, right?
The other side's doing the same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's very
yeah,
Keynesian.
yeah.
You dig the holes and then you fill them back in, right?
Which was not what Keynes was advocating.
I know, obviously. He just used it as an example, but everybody
was a
brings that up.
joke.
So I'm sure you've read Mark Blyth's Austerity, right?
I haven't actually.
Really? I'm surprised
no.
because you're talking about austerity. That book is great.
I've got this thing about, because I know that, you know, this thing that that keeps coming up as a theme, which is, you know, when governments spend, they spend using keystrokes, which means they can't run out of money.
Correct.
Or it's inapplicable to talk about them running out of money, which mean, you know, as the way Warren says it, and a lot of other people, it's in the deficit myth. You know, the government neither has nor doesn't have any dollars. It's the scorekeeper for the dollars. It changes numbers up and down, you know, and so given that that's the way governments spend, and it's not a question of running out of money, there's lots of other things that we should be concerned with, because it's not a question of running out of money.
Yeah.
But these ideas about, well, government are going to have to increase their borrowing if they want to spend. And you'll see a lot of people who understand this thing that I just said, that floating exchange rate currencies mean you can't run out. It doesn't come from anywhere. It comes from the issuer. It comes from the keyboard, right? There's a lot of people who understand that, who are kind of perhaps post-Keynesian economists, who still write like the government borrows when it sells bonds, which to me, it's the wrong framing. You know, to go back to that Lakoff thing, it's like it, you know, it's it's just basically converting dollars, non-interest bearing dollars, into interest bearing dollars, moving. You know what I'm saying. And there's certain people who are that close to sort of like MMT that then will throw in something, you know, really counterproductive, like, well, the government's going to have to buy, or it's okay for the government to borrow now because interest rates are really low. And it's like, well, you know that the interest rate is a policy variable. The whole yield curve can be controlled. You know, it's, you know, and so anyway, there are some economists who fall into that category who I'm like, I would agree with about everything, but they still don't seem to get this this really fundamental thing about how governments spend, and I just find it impossible to read them.
I don't. You can overspend, though. That's an important distinction, I think. You can't run out of money. Implies that you can overspend, and there really is a constraint. The resource constraint is ever present, and I think sometimes some of the left wing MMTers they completely ignore the fact that there is that resource constraint. And I'm not accusing you of this. I never, and no one on your podcast they're always very open about the inflation constraint. I don't know how we move from being afraid of the deficit to being afraid of inflation. And I feel like at the moment when we're experiencing a lot of inflation is like MMT's opportunity to pounce. This is the time to say, you know, inflation is bad. But I hear so much of the dialogue is this inflation is the result of MMT, and this inflation proves MMT is bullshit. Which I don't think. I mean,
what can you do if people are just, you know, one time you know, on the one hand they're saying MMT is crazy, nobody ever believes it, nobody will form policies on the basis of it, and you know, that if you know, Bernie Sanders was advised by Stephanie Kelton. He didn't win.
Yeah.
You know, Stephanie's not at the table, at the policy making table. You know, I think she's very
I
influential.
bet she has AOC's cell phone number.
Fair enough, but you know what I mean?
Of it.
Sure, no, but I'm just saying, you know, she's not, you know, Biden's go-to person. She's not,
No.
you know, you know, if I think if you had an MMT running the Fed, the Treasury, or you'd have a zero rate policy permanently. You know, people would not be talking about raising interest rates to head off inflation. You know, monetary policy would be over. You know, and so what's happening right now is they're talking about raising interest rates, and I think the Fed have said they're going to, you know, hike interest rates because inflation. That's the only tool they've got. So that's not MMT. MMT is not happening.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I think it's you know, more and more people are listening to the MMT economists. If there's one thing I could say to anybody listening, especially skeptics, is do listen to if you're serious about wanting to know what the theory says and what it implies, go to the trustworthy sources. You know, I mean, you know, I've tried not to misspeak, you know, I've tried not to misrepresent it. But you know, our podcasts, we interview, we've only ever interviewed about a handful of people who would say, I'm very MMT adjacent, but I'm not quite there with it. I don't quite, this is where I differ from it. And so it's not that I can't stand people that differ from it. I prefer them to be explicit about it when they differ from it, you know. So there are a few people out there who are saying, I'm saying what MMT is, and then they say something that's not MMT. And there's a lot of that out there. So, you know, the sources that I think are unequivocally MMT, I'll try and remember them all. Warren Mosler, Bill Mitchell, they're the co-founders.
Steve Keen.
No, he's not. He's
really?
He's very close to MMT, but he's not. He would say that, you know.
Really?
Yeah, really, yeah. Huh. But he's very close to it. But that's why I like Steve Keen, because, you know, he's explicit about where he diverges from MMT. Yeah. And he's also said, he had a very popular book that came out in 2007 called Debunking Economics, which was really pulling apart neoclassical economics, which is the only game in town, really. This is monetary policy. This is where all that comes from, right?
Well, everyone thinks, all of our audience thinks Austrian is the mainstream. And I always try to tell them, no, it's neoclassical.
Yeah. I mean, Austrian economics is very popular and out there, and people talk about it a lot, you know, but it's not the paradigm that we're in at the moment, you know.
What would be the MMT solution or policy advocation for trying to curb the current inflation right now?
Well, our last few episodes have been on that topic. So it's complicated, right? Because there's only one policy prescription in MMT, and which is the job guarantee. And I know instantly that sounds to a conservative person, oh, you know, the government are going to pay people, and that, you know, that who would ordinarily remain unemployed, and they would keep inflation down because we need that 5% of people to be unemployed to fight inflation. And what we're saying is, okay, that buffer stock of people that kind of people move into it when in a downturn, people move into involuntary unemployment. They're looking for a job and they can't find it. And then in an upswing, they move out of that pool, and the private sector will hire, maybe the public sector will hire as well, and they move out of that pool. But that pool never disappears. It expands and contracts, and that's the business cycle, or what gets called the business cycle. And what the MMT economists are saying is, if those people in that buffer stock, which we admit needs to be there, right? If they were working, if they had a job, they would transition out of that pool a lot faster, because the private sector prefers to hire, or private sector employers prefer to hire people who are already working over people who have come from unemployment. So that's the idea. And also the idea is, at the moment there's this kind of zero bid for that person. So if you create money to spend on, you know, hiring that labor, and you get some productivity out of that labor, then, you know, that's not the kind of spending that's going to blow the lid off prices, you know. And so that's the only policy that's in MMT, and that was, and that's been that way for like 25, 26 years. So with inflation, with the current inflation, or with the inflation of the 70s, you know, what MMTists talk about, and it's not just MMTers, but, you know, other people who are kind of, you know, want to move beyond monetary policy, is, look, how is making more people unemployed going to bring down the price of oil, which is being gouged right now? How is making more people, you know, how is not giving the economy the money it needs to run at its full potential, you know, going to change these brittle supply chains that we've, you know, that keep letting us down? And so there should be a long-term policy and a short-term policy. And I guess, you know, one thing you want to do, and you know, because this is like a relatively new development, like, you know, we've had a war that's like on the cusp of world war, right? Russia, Ukraine, coming hard on the heels of all the pandemic disruption, you know, and the sanctions and stuff like that's kind of, you know, affected all kinds of prices. You have to take the sources of the inflation in turn, you know, like what fixed the inflation of the 70s, you know, wasn't the recession that ensued when, after Volcker hiked the interest rates. You know, if you asked Warren Mosler, MMT founder, he's of the opinion that deregulating natural gas sort of broke the Saudis' ability to control energy prices to the extent that they were controlling them, for instance. Or, you know, and then obviously when some kind of peace resolution came out, you know, because obviously there was an oil embargo, wasn't there? The OPEC countries were kind of sanctioning us for, I guess, siding with Israel back in the 70s, and that's, you know, that's what, you know,
they jacked up the price of oil, and
exactly,
that made everything more expensive.
Yeah. So you know, these are complicated things, and again, you know, energy is going to go through the roof at times like this, and then companies are, as prices are generally going up, you know, we know that there are sort of economists and reporters who have been on sales calls of corporations going, yeah, we're going to use our pricing power, i.e. our monopoly pricing power, to jack up our prices because we can, and we're doing it for you, the shareholder. So we know that's kind of that's happening. So, well, that's, you know, I know it doesn't. I know what would be lovely is like a nice technocratic solution that doesn't have any politics in it. You know, let's flick a switch and do something, and that's how we should control inflation. But I think these things are policy things. You know, policy means talking about politics. So what's your policy when a company with monopoly pricing power, or oligopolistic pricing power, what's your policy when they gouge prices to such an extent that it hurts the whole economy? You've got to have a policy on that, you know, and so what that policy is kind of that, you know, then you have to go, all right, this is not MMT now, this is me saying, okay, so, you know, how are you going to bring those prices down? You know, price controls would be a good idea.
In business, in business, you usually raise your prices until demand dries up. That's the whole idea behind supply and demand. So you're gauging, you don't know what people are willing to pay for your product. And obviously you want the highest margin. You want the low you want to spend the least amount of money on inputs and people to pay the most amount of money for the product. And that's your margin, right? That's where
But it's
your profit
complicated
comes
because
from.
you might not compete on price, right? You know, if you're a big supermarket like Walmart or something like that, you might take a hit on loads and loads of products because you know you can, and
Right.
it will push everybody else, every competitor, every smaller competitor out of the game because you're undercutting them.
But
You know,
simple
and
supply and
then once
demand,
you've
there is an
and
equilibrium
then
there, right?
and then once you've done that, then you can jack prices up because you've taken a hit in the short to medium term to be
Wait,
able to
can you
to be.
can you jack up prices to the point where nobody has enough money to buy anything? You can't. Like you can't do that. As soon as you list your house for
Excuse
more
me.
money than anybody, you can get up. As soon as you list
No,
your
I
house,
just
as soon
shutting the
as you
door.
list your house for more money than anybody is willing to pay, you have one option: keep the house or lower the price. Right?
Yeah. Okay, but that supply demand curve thing only applies in perfect competition, which doesn't exist,
Well, but
right?
as a
Yeah.
business, I'm only thinking of it purely from a business owner's perspective. I own a gas station, okay? I'm
But
gonna
perfect.
set my prices at $10 a gallon, and nobody's gonna come to my gas station. So I'm gonna low. Okay, how about $6? Oh, now I'm making money. Like that's how they figure out the price level. But the price level, you can't determine it. It's like the people are will. It's like how much money is in the economy that people can spend is what's determining that price level.
Yeah, but with something like energy, you pay the price of the monopolist or you shut the lights off, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yes, exactly. Obviously, but I mean, there is a
That
there is
second
a
option,
breaking point.
that second option could happen, because the Saudis or whatever, we probably need their exports more than they need dollars.
Well, the Saudis
Right.
have a
I mean, I think this is what's going on with Russia going, okay, look, we want you to pay in rubles.
yeah,
So
no, I know about that. Let's
to
stick
proper
let's
to
stick with
proper
the Saudi
Paris.
example because I think
Okay,
it's a
right.
perfectly illustrates the point that I'm trying to make. And also this ties into the buffer stock thing, right? So the Saudis have enough oil that they basically are operating a buffer stock of oil. They can control the price of oil just by setting just by always bringing more oil in to meet the demand. So, but they can raise the price of oil until aggregate demand dries up, until nobody's buying their oil. Then they obviously have to lower the price or
I think they raise the price and people pay it.
well, if
I
they
think that's,
don't have the money to pay it, they can't pay it, obviously. There's a point there
yeah.
is a point when the aggregate demand dries up. I mean, this is the whole idea behind like Warren Mosler said, he thinks most businesses are running at 50% of their capacity. And the only reason they're running at 50% of their capacity is because there's not enough consumers out there to buy the goods and services that they're making. But if all of a sudden you doubled the population, doubled the consumer base, they could meet that demand and make more money. So
You might not need to double the population. You could double wages.
there's another area that I think I've made some headway on bringing people over to the MMT story because of the way we do spending, and it ties in again on the inefficiency front, where people, I think their moral intuitions are tuned to, and this is one of the reasons why they don't like government. They don't like inefficiency. They perceive government as being inefficient, and I mean, really, government is inefficient, especially if they're operating in a non-MMT lens where, because the economy is running hot, they have all of these tax receipts and they decide now is the time to build bridges and roads when it's not the time to build bridges and roads. Like if you're in a business environment and you're going to pay more money for labor, you're you're going to, obviously that's going to cause inflation. The time to invest in your business is when you can buy goods and services cheap, when you can buy labor cheap. And especially if you're in a government situation where you are the money supply, the time to buy roads and bridges is when in downturns.
Yeah. And it is a downturn though, isn't it, Adam? I know you've got inflation and we've got it here, but there is unemployment.
Right.
There are people who
I don't know
want a
what the
job.
Unemployment is out right now, but I think we aren't in a downturn.
But I'm just saying, like, if it's not zero, there's slack in the economy. And so
there is no slack in the economy right now because of the supply chain disruption. So even if we had enough labor to turn those supplies into goods and services, the supplies don't exist to turn into goods and services. Right now, our unemployment rate is at 3.6, which is much lower than regular. Right now, the economy is super hot. And I think that's the cause of the inflation. We've overheated the economy.
But that's a lot of people. You know what I mean? That's a lot of people who, like, okay, you're saying, the fact that you can't earn a living, you can't earn the thing that you need to feed yourself and your family, we're cool with that.
Right.
I mean, if to go back to the guy, the room full of people, the guy at the door with the gun, okay, Warren's got his 50 people in front of him, and the tax is one business card each, and he only spends 40.
Right.
10 people are gonna be looking for work that pays in his business card.
Yeah.
That don't have it. That's unemployment. That's how we define unemployment, right? You know that. Yeah, you've heard me talk about all that.
Warren Mosler does an excellent job of defining unemployment as a government mistake, which I completely agree with. The government taxed too much money or spent too little money, and that's why those people are unemployed. I completely agree with that. Now we're in a weird situation, though, because of the supply chain.
When you say 3.5%, if you sort of like do them, I can't do it, but if you did the maths,
Christian,
how many
people? I don't care.
How many people does that add up to? So
those people need tough love, okay?
Those
lazy people need to get off their asses and get some. No, I'm
exactly. It doesn't, but exactly. I know you are, but like, it doesn't matter what they do, how they get off their asses, what course they go on, what masters. It doesn't matter what they do. They're not allowed to have a job.
You have had, Christian, I know, listen, I've had family members that have made it their lifelong goal to stay on unemployment. So I know there are definitely people who are working the unemployment system. They exist.
But it is built into, as nobody can deny what we're saying here.
Oh, true.
Even the monetarists understand this. We use unemployment to tame inflation. It's built into the system. So, as much as you might know lazy people, they're actually necessary. If you want to look at it through a monetarist lens, they're actually necessary for people to be able to tell this story that, it's their own lack of guile that's put them in that position. Whereas no, it's actually our system. That's what we do.
There is some.
The monetarists right now are going, you've got to increase interest rates. The way they think it works is, if it's more expensive to borrow, less people will borrow. The flow of dollars in the economy will go down. People will get laid off. Some businesses will go out of business. Some businesses will shrink. And that will bring prices down. And it's just kind of, that's normal. We'll just
that's
make
terrible.
More people.
Yeah,
we'll just make more people desperate. Great, And then what's that going to be good for at election time? A whole bunch of desperate people who can't earn the means to look after themselves, and a whole bunch of people scared of those people and blaming those people. And I don't know, who is Paul Ryan going to run? Hey, listen to me. I'm the sensible economy guy. And,
he's Paul Ryan. No, he's out of the picture.
It's going to be great for the.
It's going to be DeSantis and Trump.
Right,
hey, I forgot to ask. Do you think Trump is going to run again in 2024? I have a $500 bet with Sitch on whether or not Trump is going to run.
Is that a real $500 bet?
It's a
Yeah.
real bet, yeah.
Real McCoy, real money. Sitch is going to send me pennies, I know, because I'm going to win this bet. And he's going to be
You're not. I'm going to win this bet. Everyone is going to be eaten. Is going to be totally wrong here.
I think
Okay.
I think you guys are going to know better than me what it's like out there.
He's got to run. He's totally going to run.
I mean, he obviously wants to, doesn't he? I mean, it's
what's going to happen on your side if Trump runs in 2024 and wins a second term? What's your home life going to look like?
You mean just like
your friends and family?
What UK looks like? Well, it doesn't really.
Your local circle.
It's a pretty normal opinion to have over here that like Trump is like being generous, like unhinged. You know, like he said all the stuff that he said because he was unhinged. That's the nice way to put it. I'm a bit more like he's been working in the media his whole life. He knows what he's saying when he says it. You know,
there's plenty of that opinion around here too, but there is a lot of people who love him. So I think
what I'm saying is I think, or maybe I'm just really very disconnected from from the rest of the people in our country, but I know that there are. I think that there's a smaller pool of right-wing demagogues over here, but they're still very influential. But you know, I think in entertainment over here, we're desperate to find like right-wing comedians, right-wing this, right-wing that, and it's like, you know, our culture is still trying to find those people, and to me, that's upsetting enough. You know, that like, you know, we've got. I mean, there wasn't so long ago we had Bolsonaro in Brazil, we've got Boris Johnson over here. You've got Trump running the show over there. The whole world is being run by the right in terms of like who's winning elections and who's calling the shots, right? And the only reason Biden got in was because he moved far enough into the center towards the right to get in, right? You know, to me, and I know that I sound like a left-wing ideologue, and I'm comfortable with that identity.
As long as you're self-aware, Christian. Most people aren't. Like
to me, because there are right-wing ideologues. I'm a left.
I agree. I totally agree.
And you know, and to me, you know, when you've got Bolsonaro, Trump, and Johnson, you know, and you've got Orban, and you know, just the country is the world is kind of, you know, the major powers in the world are definitely to the right of center, and at that time, you know, or you know, our so-called liberal institutions are looking for like, oh, we need more right-wing commentary. We need to find the British version of Barry Weiss. You know, there's not enough right-wing demagoguery going on.
That's fun. I love Barry Weiss. How dare you? How dare you, Christian? We only have about 15 minutes more. So, and I mean, Sitch, is there anything you want to talk about before we sign off?
It was lost. I had something, but it's gone now. I forgot.
I've beaten it out of you with my waffle, Sitch. Sorry.
We've talked. I feel like we've talked very little about MMT, but that's fine.
Yeah,
that's
I feel bad. I feel bad about that, but
it's okay. It's not.
I've really enjoyed talking to you guys, or perhaps talking at you. I'm sorry about that.
You're welcome to come back, and we could have like a deeper talk. I am interested. You know, it feels like maybe you are a little bit anti-capitalist, but not. I don't. It's hard. Like,
okay. Well, let me just say. You know how you said, oh, you know, would you say socialist or Marxist or anything like that? I think capitalist has kind of lost a bit of meaning, you know, because some people would look at the way that, you know, whatever our system is that we're living under here in the UK and the one you're living under there in the US and go, it probably is socialism for like the 1% and capitalism for everybody else, right? You know, tough love for people down here and a bit more sort of protection and market manipulation and things that are not very capitalist at the very top. And so I think we've got a mixed economy, and it's not really pure capitalist, and neither is it pure socialist, or probably got any danger of going that way. But to me, I just think markets are organized. They don't occur in nature, which is probably something that a libertarian might have trouble swallowing, but they don't. And we don't have, as Adam Smith wrote, a natural propensity to truck barter and exchange. They haven't isolated those genes. You could say people do or have truck bartered and exchange, but I think we're embedded in systems, human-made systems, and markets are one of them. And the state, or the state that builds the roads and perhaps funds libraries and education, and organizes armies and stuff like that. That's another system, and these things are organized. So I think we have a mix of all of those things. State involvement, and then some. What I was trying to say earlier about that supply demand curve, you can only draw that in perfect competition. Perfect competition is when everybody is a price taker. Everybody in the market is a price taker, and there are no price setters. That doesn't exist, and it really doesn't exist in the important markets, in the energy markets, in the food markets. So to me, our recent episode was about food sovereignty, and how we'll see prices go up because of our lack of our lack of control over our food as a nation.
Distribution. Yeah, exactly.
Globally, but some nations are right there where they're like, if they go down any further, that's a lot of death and suffering. We might see prices go up, and there would be all kinds of things. So anyway, I'm just saying, to say whether I'm anti-capitalist or not, I don't think there's a real existing capitalism for me to be anti, because I think there's so much of it is determined by policy. That
I just want to say, when we talk about, like, because I know you're right in that the terms like socialists are thrown around, very freely, depending on who you're talking to. So when we say like, oh, socialists, what we mean is, we generally mean one of two things, which is people that are anti-property rights, or people that want all businesses to be run as co-ops. So, I mean, when we say socialist, I don't mean someone who wants, a public option, or who wants government-run healthcare. Or
we want the public
social
option.
Safety net, or any of these things. Because, I'm in favor of all of these things. I mean, like, people who actually just don't believe in private property rights, or think that there should be no privately run businesses.
Yeah, well, I don't think that. I'm not against privately run businesses. I think because I mean, I've been self-employed. I have a limited company. I'm not against that kind of stuff. I think it's more the reason I think I'm interested in economics and the way it impacts everybody's everyday life is that the appropriate thing to do is to discuss, okay, where is a market appropriate, or where is it not appropriate?
Yes.
Right. And just like, we'll create in a market for this thing. What outcome will come? Like, so, we've said on the podcast in the past, and we've interviewed this guy called Professor L. Randall Wray, who's another primary MMT thinker. He's excellent. And he talks about, okay, if we create a market for pollution, like we make it more expensive for people to pollute by levying a carbon tax. Well, it basically, you have to pollute to be able to pay the tax, so it's just basically a carbon tax that creates any revenue has failed. We want zero carbon. we don't need the income from the carbon. So a market in in pollution permits, for instance. Just as a for instance, I think he's not going to get us to where we want to in terms of like preserving like breathable air and, you know, the ice caps not melting and all that stuff. Just as a for instance, but like, do I want the government to run every hamburger stall? No. You know.
Yeah, no, that's great.
Makes
there
sense.
are people that do. They want to nationalize the hamburger industry, and it's terrible.
You know, and I think there are some problems that are at the scale where only something at the scale of the federal government or the central national government over here can handle. You know, I think, you know, I think climate change is one of them. But I also think a health crisis.
There's a great interview with Steve Keen where he's talking to someone, and climate change comes up. I don't even think they're talking about climate change, and Steve Keen just is like, okay, he thinks all of a sudden I'm dealing with a climate change denier here, and he completely hones in. He's like, give me your spiel why you think climate change isn't real. It's so funny. It's so and he's so pissed. He's so pissed about it. So yeah.
It is. I mean, you know, I guess people like that
they exist.
Don't they?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, would you say, you know, how you talk about, you worry about alienating the people who are more to the right of center who watch your streams? Do you think there are people who in that?
In the climate denier camp, I'm certain of it. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win them over by castigating them, by calling the president that they like a racist. That's not going to work. You got to have a light touch, like a pickpocket or a safecracker.
Yeah. I mean, but it is hard to. I mean, yeah, maybe you can do that, right? But to me, I find it hard to. You know, and this is my problem, I guess. But I find it hard to sort of. I will be pretending. I will be pretending to take them seriously.
See, I used to be in that,
and I think that's an insult.
I used to be in that position, and I was a condescending. I was a secretly condescending prick inside. I just had to let it go. I had to be like, no. I'd like become Jesus with my politics. No, they're allowed to have their beliefs. But listen, I've been wrong many, many times. We've talked about George Lakoff. I was a big believer in George Lakoff, but once I read Jonathan Haidt, I realized George Lakoff is wrong about a lot of stuff, and George Lakoff is a super hyper partisan. He's got this nation as family metaphor. That's so wrong. That is so incorrect, and it's yeah, you should read Haidt. You should read The Righteous Mind. The Righteous Mind. If you're open to it, if you're open-minded enough to it, it really demystifies conservatives. For me, I mean, I was everything you're talking about. Like, I had conservative friends, and I would talk to them, and I would think, I don't want to offend them, but this person is really beneath me. This person doesn't they don't know how the world works. They have an inaccurate view of reality. And then I read Jonathan Haidt's book, and I was like, wow, they have a very accurate view of reality, and it's kind of me that doesn't have a good view of reality.
I mean, a couple of my dearest friends are conservative. Right.
Well, that's probably why you respect conservatives to some extent.
And yeah, exactly. What they won't expect of me and I won't expect of them is, there's certain things where I'm like, I think you're wrong on this.
Right.
And, and I'm not going to pretend. I'm not going to pretend that I don't think you're actually a fucking idiot for thinking that. Because but I don't care. But I just, you know what I mean? I got to be honest with you that,
there's nothing wrong with that. Hold on. Let's make this clear, Christian. Okay, there is nothing wrong with disagreeing with people, and I completely respect that. Where I lose respect for people is when they disagree with people because they have some straw man version of their actual argument, and they're disagreeing with the straw man because the straw man is really easy to disagree with because it's so ridiculous. It's not even their argument. So I see that a lot. I see people, they're saying, I would never agree with you because I don't even really understand your argument. So they're not really in a position to agree or disagree.
Well, the other thing with height, which I mean, I kind of disagree with your characterization, Adam. I don't think height demystifies Republicans or conservatives. I think he demystifies all political thought.
Well, yeah, if
And
I was unclear, it's just for me because I was,
right.
yeah.
Right.
Well,
right.
no, but I mean, even for people who have been left leaning their whole life, like we were, and still are probably, it is demystifying to me because I think a lot of the problem is that when we come up to someone who has a different worldview than we do, I mean, and I'm definitely guilty of this a lot, still am, is that there's this assumption like, oh, this person is stupid or this person is ignorant. They don't know the information that I know. And I think a lot of the benefit with height is it's like, well, everyone just sort of has these moral foundations that they're operating under. And it kind of leans them into looking at the world in these very specific ways and interpreting information in these very specific ways. And that's kind of why people come to the conclusions they come to, whether they're factually incorrect or correct. And I guess I'm sort of in the camp where, I think when people on the left are correct about something, it's sort of chance. It's just like that just happens to reality happens to line up with those moral intuitions. And the same goes for people on the right. I don't think that we live in a world where there's one side of the equation that, has the facts and they're the ones that are operating under facts. To me, that's the illusion that I think height kind of dispels.
But then how do you explain the sort of larger numbers of climate deniers on the right than on the left?
Well, there are
because that's
tribalism. Yeah.
Because if one side, because what happens is there's some issue that comes out and then the political teams will choose a side on it. Like vaccines is the perfect example of this. So when Donald Trump was president and he's talking about, we're going to have the vaccines at the end of the year, blah, 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 blah.
Hey, I hate to interrupt, Sitch, but I'm going to send Kulinski the link just so we're on time here. So he can jump in anytime. So continue.
Okay. When the vaccines were, coming out during, or they're supposed to come out when Trump was president, there were so many people, at least in America on the left, that were like, I don't trust these vaccines. I'm not going to trust them. That anything's coming out, when Trump is president. There was MSNBC correspondents that are like, I'll take it after a few months of, when it's been out because I'm very untrustworthy. And then as soon as Biden becomes president, it's like there's a complete reversal of, I completely trust the vaccine now that, Democrat's president. So it doesn't seem to me like with like the climate change example, it's, you have these issues become politicized because obviously, big oil and all these other companies, they don't want to believe that because it hurts them, profit wise. And so it gets kind of put through the political lens. And then the people just choose the team that they're on based on the politics. It's not that like there are people looking at facts and then making independent determinations about this. I mean, I know that me and Adam have tried to go into the climate change rabbit hole, and it's just like, it's so overwhelming. I don't think most people can look at the facts and try to come up with any sort of reasonable solution on their own.
But the climate change denier is a particular category of person who is saying it's not human made. Either it's not happening or it is happening, but it's not human made, right? Is that do we agree with that definition?
Well, I think there are.
I mean, there has been a lot of movement now.
I would classify. There are people that don't even think it's happening, though. So
yeah, but there seems to be that now that opinion has become so I don't know, so like can't even be argued so much anymore that a lot of people have just moved to this. We're gonna fix it, anyway, or it's gonna be less as extreme.
Right. Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, I think the people who think it's who deny that it's happening, there's more of those on the right than there are on the left. So I don't think it's like there is no objective truth here and people just pick an identity. They're like there is a scientific consensus.
No, no,
And
no. Okay, I guess I'm not making myself clear. Is that what I'm saying is the science doesn't matter to the mainstream person's opinion. Like if for whatever reason Republicans lined up on the side of climate change because it suited the political interests of the Republican Party at the time, we would just be in the opposite situation.
Well, that is the great thing about being a conservative, and the actual thing that I'm jealous of them about is the central tenet of conservatism is everything's for sale, including our principles.
That's so,
right.
That's so incorrect, Christian.
When you live in that world, then it's just great. Anything's possible.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's so bad.
Do you think that the average?
No. I mean,
do you think that the average person?
Everything's for sale. If it's a good idea, then people will buy it. If I had a bad idea,
Christian, are you following this like groomer thing that's going on in the United States now? The conservatives have started calling everyone groomers. Are you following this storyline?
Yeah, not closely, but I'm aware of it. Yes.
So what is different than what you're saying from some right-wing ideologue coming on and telling me, everyone, like all people on the left are groomers interested in diddling kids. There's all communists. They want to like.
Well, I'll tell you what is sort of behind that comment is, okay, well, what are markets?
Markets?
What are they? Are things on sale or are they not on sale?
Well, yeah, it's a exchange of goods.
What do conservatives love?
Traditional values.
Markets? Do they like markets?
They love.
They used to.
Is being right of said to got anything to do with markets? Has being right of said to got anything to do with like get government out of everything because we like markets?
I think that's more libertarian, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I do. I mean,
but what you're talking about isn't exclusive to the right at all. I mean, this was a big issue with the Black Lives Matter, with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter stuff that we went through, was that when people actually went through the facts and the data, they would say, hey, wait a minute, there actually isn't some giant amount of unarmed black men that are killed by police every year in America. This doesn't actually hold up to the numbers and the way that the media is portraying it to hold up to. And yet the narrative still runs wild.
I mean, we'll have to agree to differ on that point.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't know if you remember, well, I mean, because you're not an American, so I don't know, like right before George Floyd happened, we had a lot of Republicans and conservatives come out and they would protest against the lockdowns. And we kind of heard this, how dare these people do this? Well. Right, yeah. I heard from the media, how dare people do this? Not only is it wrong, but they're going out and they're protesting in a big mob of people and they're spreading COVID and they're being very irresponsible. And then like a month later, George Floyd happens and you have like the amount of people protesting, explodes to like 1,000 times what it was before. And everyone's just like, well, I guess it's fine because it's a position that we agree with. We're not concerned that the people protesting outside now are spreading COVID to each other.
Okay. Can we get back to this idea of markets though?
Okay.
Do conservatives like markets or not?
Well, I don't think so. I think I perceive of conservatives as being fans of tradition. If markets are the tradition, then yes, they will be in favor of markets. And I think traditionally America has been capitalist, and that's why conservatives are in favor of markets, because they've worked for us.
Okay,
but I don't think intrinsically they're for markets.
Same kind of thing over here as well. So,
but why?
So
why?
I'm just saying. I'm just saying that the idea of governments organizing something is something that people on the left will not prefer, but be less resistant to than a conservative, right? Because for the conservatives, the idea of the government getting involved is distorting markets.
But this is and I don't like that distorting markets.
Which is I know, but
yeah.
that's what they think, right? That is what they think. You know, that there was this state of nature with, you know, people truck bartering and exchanging, and then the government got involved and messed it all up. And that's what I mean by conservatives think everything should be for sale.
Yeah,
they don't like it when it's not for sale.
I think that's a mischaracterization of conservatives, but
it's not. There's, I mean, in America, it was very.
They don't like it when the government gets involved in people just, you know, but they, you know, what they would conceive as a state of nature, like markets.
No. I mean, I like in America, you know, with Reagan, we had, you know, 50 years of sort of the neoliberal economic order, and that was definitely the defining philosophy of the right. Now, I think it's changed a little bit now with Trump, because there are a lot of people kind of wavering, coming under this banner of populism, who are anti-corporation now. Now, I don't think they're anti-corporation for any ideological reason. I think it's because they perceive corporations as, you know, being left-wing in their, at least virtue signaling to the left. And they do, I think a lot of people on the right are waking up to the fact that they have been getting screwed over economically by these corporations. So that might start to change in America. I'm not sure it's going to bring about anything positive. But...
Hey, let's welcome Kyle Kulinski to the stream. What's up, Kyle? Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, my pleasure. Don't let me interrupt the train of thought.
Things are getting spicy here.
Kyle, pleased to meet you. I really enjoyed. You had a really great conversation with Glenn Greenwald a few years ago that I've really enjoyed a lot. Thanks for having that.
Thank you. No, thank you.
It was. It ended up talking about, I guess, white supremacy and it was just. I think he was talking about his work when he was a lawyer defending neo-Nazis and stuff like that, and why he was doing that.
Was it the one I'm not sure if I've spoken to him on my channel since like 2015-ish. Was it like, the topic of the conversation Sam Harris, and then it like branched off?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Those guys hated each other. I don't know if they hate each other as much anymore, but like they despised each other.
Really? Why did they hate each other?
Glenn's sort of got off a cliff, hasn't he, with his
Dude, so to answer your question, why did they hate each other? It's really interesting, because so I came up in politics, and I was reading like Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, and I was part of like the new atheist thing. But then also at the same time, I was a lefty because I read Chomsky and stuff. And so in my world, like lefty politics and like, you know, anti-theist stuff sort of was married at the hip. And then you had Sam Harris, who represents like anti-theism and atheism, and you had Glenn, who at the time represented like really strong left politics. He viewed Chomsky as like, you know, one of his idols. And so they would butt heads over this issue of basically Muslims and Islam and Al-Qaeda. And, you know, Glenn Greenwald would accuse Sam Harris of being like a bigot and an Islamophobe, and Sam Harris would be like, I'm not a bigot or an Islamophobe, like I'm just against like whatever extremist Muslims. And then they were talking past each other for like 3 years straight, where they despised each other. Those guys didn't say a single kind word to each other the entire time. And then what's really funny is that Joe Rogan was really close with Sam Harris a while back. And then I actually, like whatever it was, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago or whatever, I'm the one who hooked up Glenn and Joe Rogan, where they had a podcast together. And now I haven't seen Sam Harris talk to Rogan since then, but like there literally may have been like a mean girl situation where they like, now Sam Harris and Joe aren't friends because Joe is actually kind of friendly with Glenn Greenwald now.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Well, I think Sam was very put off by Joe being skeptical on a lot of the COVID stuff too.
Yes, yeah,
100%. Yeah, in fact, there, you know, he in his podcast he took like pot shots, not just at Joe, but also at like
Brett,
one of the Weinsteins. I don't remember which one it is who was doing the whole ivermectin stuff and leaning into that, but like you could tell that Sam was not having that.
Right.
Hey,
wasn't Glenn came out? He was mad at Sam when on Bill Maher when he had that interaction with Ben Affleck.
Yep. Yeah. Glenn was totally, he was way more in the Ben Affleck camp than he was in the Maher Harris camp.
Well, you kind of said something interesting, Christian, which is, do you perceive Glenn Greenwald as being right wing now?
Did I say that?
Well, you said you seem like he's gone off the deep end or something.
He has. I think he has. Yeah, he's kind of reflexively punching left these days, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, why do you think that is, though?
Oh God, I can't remember, because I kind of, after about 2 or 3 sort of experiences of him doing that, just for me, I mean, who cares what I think? I just thought, I'm not,
Well, okay. Well, why do you?
So I haven't actually,
Right.
sort of for like, I'd have to say 6 months really engaged with anything that he's done.
So Glenn, I have a real personal affinity for Glenn because I know him privately, and like we've had nothing but wonderful interactions, and he's a really, really sweet guy, and he's like fiercely loyal. So in a sense, I feel fiercely loyal to him as well. In terms of his politics very publicly now, his main theme,
he has a persona that I suspect is different to what he's actually like.
Well, his main theme, the crux of most of his arguments these days is just like, aren't liberals really stupid? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's almost everything he focuses on, which, if that's your cup of tea, by all means, but certainly his focus is more that than it has ever been previously. I think that's kind of undeniable.
Well, my big sticking point with Glenn is that he does this thing that really bothers me, where he keeps throwing wokeness as like a liberal problem, and he's denying that wokeness arose, even though like there's a lot of liberals that are definitely using wokeness to virtue signal, but he's denying, it seems like, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, that wokeness really came from a far more leftist academic theory and thought process. And it's not really fair to blame liberals for wokeness now.
Yeah, I think so. More recently, he's changed his terminology to blame liberal-leftists. So he like throws both of them in there when it comes to criticizing them for wokeness. But to your point, I do think he used to do that, where it would just be the word liberal. But I don't know. He even says he doesn't really categorize himself as a leftist anymore, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, because he gets dogpiled all the time for stuff he says, where like lefty Twitter will go after him sort of ruthlessly, and that further turns him off to lefties. And so the only label that he truly accepts across the board is civil libertarian. That's the one that I've heard him like embrace wholeheartedly, because he was big with like the ACLU, and that's his flavor of politics that he self-identifies as.
It's interesting, and it's actually kind of sad that we define ourselves by who's attacking us, because it's like, if his politics hasn't really changed at all, but he's just getting attacked from the left because he's attacking, liberals and people on the left. So suddenly he's like, well, I guess I'm not on the left anymore. It's like, but maybe you still are on the left.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point. And I feel like you're the only person who I've ever heard make that point, because so many people, no, seriously, they get their brains broken by like social media. And they just start defining themselves as like, I'm against this. And it's like, well, if you actually just think through the issues and go point for point, that actually is your definition of what label fits you. It's not like, I don't like these people. That's not good enough grounding for that.
Well, it just seems to me that so much of politics isn't people have principles and then they try to figure out what they believe. It's just figuring out what team I'm on. And I think that's a very innate, humans kind of evolved to be in this camp. I think that's why you have kind of like the Dave Rubin situations where, people get attacked, or even the Candace Owens situations where people get attacked by one side and they're like, oh, I guess I'm not on this team anymore because I'm getting attacked by these people. So now I'm going to just completely switch to this other team. And it's like, well, that doesn't really make sense from a principled level, but I don't think people look at politics on a principled sense.
With Glenn Greenwald, though, what came first? Because he just kind of made a habit of going on Tucker Carlson, didn't he? Do you know what I mean? It's like, and obviously Tucker is booking him because he's going, yeah, liberals are stupid. And it's like, it's just a circle jerk, isn't it? Really, it's hard to respect him, really.
So I'm one of the few lefties who will like openly argue that you should engage everywhere. And I
are you
stand
going
by
on
that.
Tucker soon? Kyle?
No, I've
Will
never
we
been
see
invited.
you on Tucker? If he
I don't
invited you,
think-
it sounds like you would go, though.
Well, it honestly depends, because that was the second part of the point that I was going to get to, which is, yeah, it's okay to go on there and find some common ground when there actually is common ground. But also, I mean, just for clarity's sake, you'd almost like to, for the record, be like, but here's this other thing that I really like disagree with you on. So I'm not just coming. I don't want to be the lefty who goes on right platforms to only bash other lefties, because then you know what I'm saying? Like,
of course not.
But again,
And I
I'm
think-
fine with agreeing where we agree, but also just for clarity's sake to state, like, I'm not with you on this, this, and this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's not what happens on Tucker Carlson. is it?
Agreed.
And,
Right,
and so,
agreed.
and knowing that, and you know, it's not just some new show that's come out of nowhere and nobody knows what it is. We know what it is, right? And you know when he books you to go on there, not you personally. One knows when one gets booked to go on Tucker Carlson, you are a prop, right?
Well, that's one narrative, but I don't necessarily
Tucker
know that it's accurate.
has a worldview, or the people that put the show together, including him, have a worldview, and it's basically let's get people on that fit that worldview. So if we get a leftist on, or our house leftist, they better be a leftist that's bashing leftists.
That's so bad. That's so bad, Christian. That's so terrible.
What?
So what's
Because you're casting all of Tucker Carlson as just propaganda, and
I mean, that is true.
Well, it
though.
is.
I don't know.
It is.
so I actually
Adam, you're
think-
making it very hard for me to respect your intelligence right now.
Now he's coming after me.
I'm exerting myself, right? Tucker Carlson is not propaganda.
Well, no, I don't.
What
Tucker
planet are you on?
Tucker Carlson is accused of a lot of things that I just like. Yes, it's nebulous. It can be seen either way, but I haven't seen him do. Like a lot of the clips that go around are Tucker Carlson endorses the Great Replacement theory and shit like that. I don't know if that's true.
There was one time when he got caught off guard, which was that Scandinavian guy who used his phone and tape recorded, his end of the conversation because he got cut from the show. And basically this guy, I forgot his name, but maybe you guys will remember it.
the
And
economics guy. I don't remember his name.
He basically said, this trope, which I happen to think there's some truth in, that TV news or whatever is millionaires being paid by billionaires to blame the poor, and Tucker was taking issue with that. I mean, I check out the clip, but basically Tucker really loses it with him because he goes, well, you're a millionaire, right? And this is the structure of the show. And that was the one time where it actually entered the record because this guy surreptitiously taped it on his end, but it got cut from the show, and he couldn't stand being confronted by the actual reality of what he's making and what he's doing.
Well, I don't want to turn the show into a conversation about Tucker Carlson just because I don't watch Tucker Carlson. I don't know a lot about Tucker Carlson. I see clips going around. I see people calling Tucker Carlson names and stuff like that. But
maybe the clips are the point.
I just don't know enough about it to have an intelligent conversation about it.
I think the thing with Glenn going on Tucker is that, Glenn is very anti-establishment.
Right.
And I do think he sees common cause with, I think a lot of populist left see, common cause with populist right wingers on that level. And I think that's why
they're both
going.
populist.
That's Fox, isn't it? Home of the anti-establishment. Go on, Fox.
Well, that's what's interesting about Tucker, that he's trying to appeal to that audience.
Yeah, so I actually think he's more sophisticated than he's given credit for. I think a lot of the populism is really functionally faux populism because he redirects that energy to support like standard establishment Republicans. But in terms of appealing beyond just like the Sean Hannity fans, I think he has the ability to sort of, pull from some independents and some more moderate people. And he's the first kind of like in the mold of 2016 version of Trump style host. You know what I mean? It's not standard Mitt Romney Republicanism. It's like it's a new sort of faux populist Trump type thing. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons why he's gotten such a big audience. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that a lot of it really is just posturing, because if you end up supporting the same politicians that are part of that wing of the Republican Party that is the same as the Mitt Romneys and the Mitch McConnells, then it's just like, it all comes to naught,
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
I agree.
Christian, I think I'm gonna say goodbye just because
Yeah.
we wanted to.
Yeah.
We had planned on leaving a bit earlier, but do you want to pitch anything before you take off?
No, I just apologies in advance if I've been too political.
No.
This is a political
the-
show. so-
Listen,
these are
Christian,
my in terms of
We
but, you know,
want. I definitely want to have you back because we
Right,
love
yeah.
arguing about this stuff, and you seem to be arguing in good faith, even though we probably disagree on a lot of things. But
Mhm.
but
yeah,
that's
well,
okay.
that,
Yeah.
you know, that's a really happy outcome for me because I am saying these things in good faith, and
Yeah.
and the times where my blood pressure goes up is when good faith is assumed on
Right.
the other side, when we've had so many examples of reasons to not assume it. For
Right.
instance, in the case of Tucker Carlson, I mean,
Right.
you know, just the few,
Well,
you know, it's
we'll-
not been so many hours that this
We'll
mass
argue-
shooting
we'll
was
plan-
inspired by his screeds. So,
we'll plan an entire hour of how bad faith Tucker Carlson is next
I
time.
know I can't do the emotional labor to watch it, but I will. But all I want to say is, like, you know, whether, you know, I come across like a left-wing demagogue or not, or not political enough, you know, the government does only spend one way when it spends. You know,
Yes.
please bring your skepticism and investigate that if you would like. That I'm happy for you to do that, and you know, when you discover how that whole system works, some implications follow from that, and to me, that's where modern monetary theory is at. You know,
Yeah.
and that's why it's important. So,
And
you know, I don't want to
we'll
missell
continue.
it.
We'll continue talking about it as well. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Christian.
Okay.
We'll see you next time. And I did put a link to your podcast in the description, so check it out.
Thanks, Adam.
Nice meeting
Thanks.
you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Carl, and Sitch, and
Thank
and
you.
Adam.
Nah, it wasn't nice beating Adam. But,
Right. Do I need to press anything now?
yeah, you press the little like leave button.
Okay. All right. Cheers, guys.
Take care.
See ya.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.